Welcome to Cosmos, a deep dive into the fascinating universe we live in. Today, we'll talk about the smallest and speediest planet in our solar system, Mercury. Mercury is the first planet from the Sun, orbiting at a distance of 57 million kilometers away from it. Mercury formed about 4.5 billion years ago when gravity pulled swirling gas and dust together to form the small planet closest to the Sun. Despite its proximity to the Sun, Mercury is not the hottest planet in our solar system, even though it can be as hot as 430 degrees Celsius on its day side and minus 100 degrees Celsius on its night side. The title of the hottest planet actually goes to Venus. It is the smallest planet at 4,800 kilometers wide, being one-third the size of our Earth. Mercury's axis of rotation is the smallest among all planets and is tilted just 0.1 degrees with respect to its plane of its orbit around the Sun. That means it spins nearly perfectly upright, so does not experience seasons the same way as many other planets do. It has no atmosphere, but it has the same exosphere of potassium, sodium, hydrogen, helium, and oxygen. This exosphere changes through Mercury's year because of its eccentric orbit. When at proximity, the sodium and other elements in the atmosphere get released, giving it a noticeable glow. When further away, it disappears. Under all that, Mercury has layers like other rocky planets, with a rocky and metallic crust made of a high ratio of magnesium to silicon and a lower ratio of aluminium and calcium to silicon. It has traces of iron, thorium, and titanium, and high amounts of sodium and potassium. Below that, there's a shockingly thin, sulfur-rich mantle of just 700 kilometers compared to Earth's 2,900 kilometer mantle. And under that is an unusually large core of molten iron compounds instead of the usual solid core like Earth. This core takes up 80% of the planet's mass. The core takes up 80% of the planet's mass. It is cooling down, which causes the planet to shrink inward, ironically making the smallest planet even smaller. Onto Mercury's surface, it would appear grayish-brown to the human eye. The terrain is very interesting, being bombarded with craters with bright streaks around them, which are called crater rays, formed when an asteroid or comet strikes the surface. There is also long valleys and dust, giving it an appearance like our moon. Another interesting feature is the weird hollows with flat floors that were discovered just recently. They are formed due to sublimation from the rocks due to the solar winds. In sublimation, solids are directly evaporated into gas. There are also cliffs called fault scarps that can be as tall as 1 kilometer and as long as 375 kilometers. Also, don't forget the Colorens Basin, a large plain on Mercury. If you think that there'd be no water on this planet, then you're wrong. Mercury may have water ice at its north and south poles inside deep craters, but only in regions in permanent shadows like the night side of Mercury. In those shadows, it is cold enough to preserve water ice despite the high temperatures on the sunlit parts of the planet. Mercury's magnetic field at the surface has just 1% the strength of Earth's magnetic field. Its magnetic field is dipolar like Earth. This is because its core is cooling down. It is still strong enough to deflect solar winds though. It interacts with the magnetic field of the solar wind to sometimes create intense magnetic tornadoes that funnel the fast, hot solar wind plasma down to the surface of the planet. Another interesting fact is that Mercury's highly eccentric egg-shaped orbit takes the planet as close as 47 million kilometers and as far as 70 million kilometers from the Sun. It orbits extremely fast, once every 88 days. For this reason, it is named after the messenger of the gods in Roman mythology. It completes one rotation every 59 Earth days. Mercury and the Sun have an orbital rhythm, with Mercury orbiting 3 times for every 2 revolutions around the Sun. We know Mercury was observed by humans for thousands of years. It was seen as an unusual star that moved super quickly and appeared alternately in the morning and the evening. Example, the Babylonians called Mercury Uber Idim Kudur in 1000 BCE, meaning the jumping star. They tracked the planet's movement in the sky relative to other stars. Also, the Greeks labeled Mercury as planetas, or wandering star. In 400 BCE, Heraclides of Pontus suggested that Mercury actually orbits the Sun and not Earth. Like the geocentric theory suggested, we began to suspect that Mercury orbits the Sun a long time ago. And people like Aryabhatta and Bhaskaracharya I also slowly noticed Mercury stayed close to the Sun. However, they never fully accepted the heliocentric theory. Mercury is actually the second densest of the planets, only second to Earth. This means if Mercury was the size of Earth, then it would have almost the same gravity as Earth. It is still small though, being smaller than 2 moons, which are Ganymede, Jupiter's largest moon, and Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Many missions were sent to Mercury before, like Messenger in 2004, which collected data about the surface, craters, geological history, and its inner composition, as well as its offset magnetic field. Messenger arrived at Mercury 7 years later after launch and collected data for 4 years before it crashed into Mercury in 2015. Mariner 10 also sent data about Mercury's core and exosphere in 1974 after visiting Venus earlier that year. JAXA and ESA have also sent a joint mission in 2018 called Bepi Colombo, which will explore more about this relatively undiscovered planet. It will discover and map the planet's surface and also discover the interior of Mercury in 2025. Summary: Mercury is a very interesting planet with a lot of interesting features we are still researching about today. This undiscovered planet interests and fascinates curious scientists this day.